In most strategy games, health is all that matters to a unit. A unit can keep fighting until it runs out of health, then it dies. The Total War games also have this system, but one of the key features of the Total War games is a second trait that also determines whether or not your unit is going to keep fighting. In the Warhammer games, this is called leadership. Managing your unit's leadership is vital if you want to be an effective commander. Essentially, your unit's leadership, which is called morale in the other Total War games, determines how courageous and mentally resilient your units are. Higher values represent units that are better prepared to fight on when wounded, stand fast despite watching their friends die in the heat of battle, and to hold the line against even the most horrific monstrosities of the old world. As these things pile up, units grow more and more terrified until eventually their morale breaks and they are sent fleeing from the battle. This is called routing. You have no control over units that are routing, though if they remove themselves from danger and or receive leadership buffs, they may rally and return under your control. Units that are routing will not fight back against attackers, so it's vital to stop your units from routing as long as possible. You may be wondering just how to do that. Well, this video is meant specifically for you. I'll explain how leadership works, how routing and rallying works, and everything else surrounding those two topics. First off, every unit has a leadership value, even if they are undead or unbreakable. Units with higher leadership values are harder to rout. With units that have over 80 leadership being so difficult to rout, you might just have to wipe out the entire squad just to get rid of them. Leadership is one of the stats that increases every time a unit gets additional experience ranks. So if there's a unit in your army you desperately want to stop from routing, giving them some experience ranks is a good, albeit expensive way to keep them in the fight longer. Leadership can be increased in a number of ways. Friendly units that are close to each other feel secure about their flanks being covered by friendly soldiers, so they get a small leadership bonus. Units also get a leadership bonus from the encouragement aura shared by lords and heroes, though this aura does not stack if you have several heroes covering the same unit. There's also numerous abilities, items and spells that can improve a unit's leadership. Decreasing a unit's leadership is far easier. Units take a hit to leadership if they are attacked in the rear, and take a massive leadership hit if they are surrounded by multiple units. Units also lose leadership as they take damage, and lose leadership based on how many friendly units have been wiped out or routed from the field. Cavalry charges also lower enemy morale, provided their target is not resistant to charges. Units also lose leadership as their fatigue increases and lose a large amount of leadership if their army's lord is slain. Slain heroes do not lower your army's morale. Units can also be intimidated and lose leadership if they are forced to fight units that are both stronger and faster than them. Units also lose leadership if they are under fire from either small arms, artillery, or spells. Units also take leadership penalties if nearby friendly units rout. This is especially dangerous if it happens to a bunch of your units at once, as it can cause a cascade that eventually makes most, if not all of your army rout, as one unit after another loses its nerve. It's important to note that while units can lose quite a lot of leadership from having allied units wiped out or routed off the map, there is an exception to this rule in Warhammer 2. Units that have the meat shield ability will not reduce the leadership of non-meat shield units when they are wiped out or routed. Therefore, a unit of zombies being destroyed will not affect the morale of your Graveguard units, making zombies ideal as cannon fodder. Leadership is also negatively impacted by the two psychology abilities, Fear and Terror. These are both auras that affect all enemy units around the unit with the ability. Fear reduces their leadership slightly, making them rout a bit faster than normally. Terror, which is pretty much always paired with fear, instead lowers the threshold at which units will rout, thus making it far easier for units with terror to rout enemy units, though those units will typically rally faster than normally. Note that any unit that has the immune to psychology ability is completely immune to the effects of fear and terror, but not to other sources of leadership reduction. Units that have the fear and/or terror ability themselves are also immune to the effects of fear and/or terror respectively. Unbreakable is a very rare and special ability that effectively means the unit will never rout regardless of how far its leadership falls. Slayers are the most famous example of units that have this ability. Unbreakable units are invaluable since they will always fight to the death unless you manually pull them out of combat. Such units can even prevent a total loss of the battle as they will keep fighting even if the rest of your army is routing, giving you a chance to rally your routing units and bring them back into the fight. Similarly, there's many abilities and spells that can further decrease a unit's leadership. Since this video will get too long if I talk about all those individually, I'm going to move on to the mechanics of routing. When a unit is routing, it will attempt to flee away from the enemy and to the nearest edge of the battlefield. Routing units will always prioritize fleeing from enemy units rather than reaching the nearest battlefield border. So a smart opponent may leave an opening towards the nearest battlefield border while he's fighting your soldiers, so they'll rout off the map immediately once they start running. A routing unit that leaves the edge of the battlefield is removed permanently from the battle, though not necessarily from the army if you're playing the campaign. As such, you want to avoid fighting near the edges of the battlefield if you're not playing an undead faction, since any unit of yours that routs will leave the battle pretty much immediately and not recover. Note that routing is always a disaster. Even if the unit your routing unit was fighting decides not to pursue, his unit probably performed a bunch of attacks on your now defenseless routing unit as they turned around to flee combat. Units that are routing can rally as long as their army's lord is still alive. Essentially, if a unit routs from combat and regains enough leadership, they will rally, which returns control of the unit to you and allows them to rejoin the battle. While such units are likely to have severely depleted combat strength, having them rejoin the battle is undoubtedly better than losing them completely. However, units cannot rally if they are actively being pursued and attacked. A unit that lost an enormous amount of leadership may become marked as shattered rather than just routing. A shattered unit will never rally and will continue to flee regardless of all other circumstances, so don't bother sending your lord after them to try and get them back into the fight. The two undead factions, which consist of the Vampire Counts and the Tomb Kings, are special when it comes to leadership, as their units will never rout. However, their units still use leadership. Basically, when an undead unit would have otherwise been routing, they will instead begin crumbling, which causes the entire squad to slowly lose health over time. This effect is not that intimidating at first, but it causes more damage over time than the regeneration ability will heal. As such, while undead are not susceptible to mass routs like other armies are, you want to avoid allowing your unit's leadership to dip too much regardless. If an undead unit's leadership is reduced too far, they will instead start disintegrating rather than just crumbling. While crumbling is a slow process, disintegrating will very rapidly destroy units completely. Avoid letting this happen to your units if you can help it. That's it for leadership. If you liked this video, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel, and if you know someone who could use some pointers, feel free to direct them to my videos. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to see you all again in my next video.